November 7th. I call this meeting to order at 4:30 p.m. Let the record show that a quorum of board members is present and that this meeting has been duly called and that its notice has been posted in accordance with Texas Open Meetings Act, Texas Government Code, Chapter 551. And no community input. So we will move on to item 4, action item A, consider approval of human resource report. Any questions? Seeing no questions, I'll call for a motion. Mr. Sanchez.
Mr. President, I move that we accept the superintendent's recommendation to approve the human resources report as presented.
Thank you for that motion. Do I have a second?
You have a second.
Thank you, Mr. Larson. Seeing no further comment, I'll call for a vote. Please raise your right hand. And that passes unanimously. Next, we will move on to item 5, Long Range Planning Committee.
Okay, and thank you. Just a kind of a little introduction, and we have a presentation for you. Mr. Miller and his department prepared an extensive long-range facility needs assessment that we looked at back in August. And so in taking that, and then of course our budget that we adopted this school year did assume a transfer from the capital and contingency fund due to a budget deficit. And we've also been looking at demographic data, which preliminarily really doesn't show a lot of growth in our district. So what we are looking at is to take these parameters and create a committee that will look at these, aligned with our strategic plan to make sure that our programs and our strategic planning move us forward the next 3 to 5 years. So what I'd like to do is just share a presentation with you and then entertain any questions after that. But as we begin the mission, and we always begin with the mission, and I think that our visionary, our purpose and our mission as a visionary leader, igniting learning for all, is something that we've got to maintain. And that's really the focus. As we look at this, how are we going to maintain and look forward with that? Committee's purpose, really to analyze the needs of the school district for the next 3 to 5 years, and then develop recommendations as to remain that visionary leader. And that's our focus. The committee charges, and we've gotten these are listed, and then also we can talk about these and get any input that you have. But really looking at that long-range planning committee will provide recommendations regarding the priorities, timelines, and costs for educational, programmatic, and facility needs over the next 3 to 5 years. And the committee will review a variety of information, including the district's strategic plan, current and projected student enrollment, the use of schools and support facilities, financial information, and educational programs and future needs of the district. And then what we're proposing, and then kind of look at this, some really the committee guidelines to evaluate projected enrollment trends and address the overcrowding and or underutilization of schools. And that will key on some of that demographic information we'll be receiving. Then prioritize district facility needs and recommend timelines and costs which will allow CCISD to maintain its facilities in a manner consistent with the community's expectations. That goes back to what we talked about in August and looking at those facility needs and how do we need to move forward with that. But we always want to think boldly and creatively on how we can improve existing programs to meet the needs of our students, consistent with our strategic plan, and make effective use of our existing facilities. And then finally, provide feedback on possible expenditure and reductions in revenue enhancements in support of multi-year financial planning. And we'll look at both of those with this committee. We always want to consider long-term financial stability, and I know Ms. Benzai has talked about that with our finance committee and with the goals, and that is to maintain a budget that provides optimal and targeted levels of funding and staffing for improved student achievement to meet the goals identified with the strategic plan, but then also to consider the district's current and projected operating and debt service fund financial position. And that is something that, as we look to the future, where are we? And we know that the legislative session that's coming up in January will have an impact on that. So we continue to look at that carefully throughout that spring semester. And then avoid the use of short-term general fund dollars and capital and contingency funds to meet long-term capital needs. So that's kind of the parameters and the recommended charges, and then looking at committee membership. We're looking at 15 parents, including representatives from different areas, and these will not be CCISD employees. They will be recommended by board members as well as myself as we work together to find some representatives from across the district. Committee membership, 15 based employees, including representatives from the different areas. It may mainly be from staff, but we certainly will take any recommendations. And then support facilities, same thing, from staff at the different support facilities. 7 high school students. We have a nice group of students that have been advising, and they have created an application. They're recommending an application process for us that we would like to move forward with and take some of their recommendations and allow students to apply for this long-range planning committee. And then there are just some proposed dates, just this initial discussion, and then considering the charges of the November board meeting, and then move forward from there and really begin those committee meetings in January. And so you can see the remainder of the dates up there. So that kind of concludes an overall summary of what we're proposing, and then kind of to answer any questions that you might have.
I'll open it up to the board for any questions. Mr. Bill?
Sure. And I guess I'll kind of start with a comment. It seems like I appreciate the intent of this committee for sure, but I'm already worried, and I mean, anyone who's been to board meetings has probably heard me talk about this a bunch, but it seems like our committees, when we have committees, it can be very dependent on who ends up on the committee as to what they recommend. And then we don't get an opportunity as a board to have really any input on what the deliverable of that committee is until they're completely done with their work. So what I would hate to see happen is for this committee to put a ton of work into developing recommendations, and then they come to the board and there's maybe one or two things that some of us disagree with, or we really would have preferred they go in a different direction, and we end up having to take an up or down vote on the entire report, and not really have any meaningful input into the process. And I think this is what has happened with the strategic plan. It's what happened with school start times, and just and even some of the COVID efforts. Anytime we have a committee like this, we kind of have to. They do their work, and then they give us something, and we have to take it or leave it. And I don't really see that as a collaborative process between the committee and the board. And so based on my reading of this, we get some input into who is actually on the committee, and then we don't see anything again until April, and by then it's almost too late to change anything. And so I guess with that's kind of a concern with all of these committees. And so my first question would be, what kinds of opportunities do we have at the outset to sort of set boundaries and set charges for this committee so that we can define what their scope is, what deliverables we expect from them, before really we even look at who would be on it?
Okay, and that's a great question. I kind of think that was part of what we were talking about today. We do have some committee guidelines that we recommended, but if we need to further define those, we kept those initially somewhat broad, to see where that needs to go, but we can certainly look at those, and if we need to define those, we absolutely can, or go back and create a little bit more definition there. As far as deliverables, I do think we were looking at the facilities, and going back to what we talked about in a recommendation on the facility needs that we're going to be looking at, that we've already looked at back in August, and kind of going back into that, as well as staffing, if there's any, kind of putting that staffing piece, and then programs. So along the way, we have the meetings, of course. Board members are always, as we did with safety, welcome to come, and staff would be an advisor, have that advisory role. And so we could certainly look at putting some, updates in there. Board members could come and observe some of that also. So if we want to put some updates, we certainly can. And go ahead.
We could also incorporate an additional board update in here in that February timeframe, so that there's another update prior to some preliminary recommendations being developed.
Yeah, I really do think that, and we just created this draft, but that's what this is. It's just a draft. So let's talk through that. We can definitely put some workshop updates, which I think would be we may or may not have much, but at least and we will also get some more specifics about what each meeting would entail, and then we can share that. Once this is approved, we can go through and develop more of a comprehensive agenda for each meeting, and then share that with the board also.
I almost think what might be more helpful is if maybe early on in the committee's work, like maybe in January, we could have an opportunity as a board to kind of take a vote on the direction they're going in. So they don't have to have finalized recommendations or anything like that, but maybe if they've kind of set their scope for the rest of the 3 months that they'll be meeting, we could go ahead and ratify that just so there are no surprises. And they would have some confidence from us that we think they're headed in the right direction, and that we feel that they're set up for success. And if we don't feel that way, then we get an opportunity to course correct. I think that might be a better way to handle it. Again, just so we don't get to the very end of this process and we're surprised, or they're surprised by maybe us not being aligned with their vision of what we want that outcome to look like.
Yes, and I think it's very valid to, we've been talking about that, how important these committees are, and to validate their work and going through a committee and maybe having those checks. It might be that even that February workshop, since they don't start meeting until January, what we could do is come back and look at some kind of preliminary, time frame. Let us get the details on each meeting, and then put some times to come back in and come back to the board and say, this is the direction, and get some feedback on that.
And just to put some context behind it, because this was mentioned not too terribly long ago, the LSC, I think, and the way it's used now, if I remember correctly, that was put together by like the facilities committee, if I remember, right after 2017 bond, when we were doing a evaluation of our facilities and how to best utilize, and then we were talking about collaborating and making sure that counseling was under one roof, special services was under one roof, and how do we maximize that space without having to build something new. So I think maybe if at a later date, and I think Mr. Bowen was probably moving in this direction, maybe finding out what the priorities, because we have the guidelines that the committee is going to work from, but maybe a little more direction in terms of, what exactly are they proposing, what exactly are they looking at, and does it jive with what the board, is thinking versus maybe the direction that the committee is moving in? Because that's kind of the 30,000-foot view. I looked at it as we're looking at how to utilize some of these things, maybe how to expand some programs, and how do we make that happen. So I think just probably expounding on that, how do we make sure that when the committee starts drilling down, maybe having a little say in that. So.
And like you said,
Is that, I didn't want to take words out of your mouth,
Yeah.
but I'm kind of thinking that's where you were going.
Yeah, I kind of think so. I think just in a more general sense, it's, even from looking at this presentation, it's just not, it seems like this committee is almost being asked to do too many things. And, because they're going to make recommendations on facilities, enrollment, programs, staffing. This is very comprehensive, and so I'd really like to know early on exactly what they are thinking they're going to be presenting to us in the end, And I kind of want to hear it from them, from the members of the committee, so that they know, and I would like for us to be able to vote on it, or maybe to send back some feedback, because, but I think a vote is important, because at the end of the day, we're not setting them up for success unless we've given them a good direction. And right now, this kind of seems like a little bit too much of a free-for-all. Like kind of the way I would think about it is, if you hire an architect, like you have a property and you want to build a house on it, right? If you just say, build me a house, and then they'll go build a house, but you haven't told them how many rooms you want, you haven't told them what you want it to look like, you just said, build me a house. And if you're upset about what you find there once they're done, well, it's your fault for not giving them enough direction. Now, at the same time, we could go too far the other direction and make a complete blueprint ourselves, and we might not be happy with that either, because they're going to have access to information and details that we might not, and they'll have more time to study it. So there's a healthy balance there between setting direction for them in order to get an outcome that we're going to be happy with. But I think the more times we get to go back and vote on the direction they have so far and let them know we think what they're doing is on the right track, the more confidence they can have that they're looking at the right things.
Yeah. And you know, it's interesting because going back, it really started as a facilities look, you know, long-range facilities, and what do we need to do to maintain our facilities. And the reason it did branch, I think, and got a little bit bigger was because maybe there's some programs, maybe we look at the facilities and not just look at the facilities in isolation, but they should be, programs should be the basis for our facilities. So maybe there's something there that we need to reevaluate. And the same thing with the finances, you know, knowing where we are financially. So it did start off with a more of a narrow scope, and it got a little bit larger because you want to make sure that our programs are the heart of what we're doing. We don't want something, our finances to be driven just about a facility, you know, maintaining our facilities, when we could be a little more creative or bold. So it probably does feel like that, and maybe that goes back to kind of the why it got a little bit bigger, but I think we can definitely bring that in, and certainly we can work with the committee on that. So we just didn't want money, you know, repairs and facilities to drive. There might be some creative things we could look at, and with all of the people together in the committee and the board, of course.
So is there a way we can separate the urgency of some of the facilities needs we have, especially when it comes to kind of the priority repairs and replacements, from our more long-term facilities needs? Because I almost think a committee like this would be more effective if it wasn't really thinking about facilities just yet, and really spent more of its time thinking about what our enrollment picture looks like long-term, and then what kinds of programs we want to have in place kind of as we mature as a district. And then after that's decided, then we come back and look at facilities after, and maybe that could even be kind of a two-part process. So agree on the academic direction of the district first, and after that's decided, come back and look at facilities. I just think doing it all at once kind of makes both efforts more difficult and less likely to be successful.
Yeah, and really that is, you know, that was kind of that reverse thinking, is first talking about facilities and wait a minute, we need to step back and look at programs. So, and we might look at a multi-pronged, and at least have the facilities and the financial side in mind when we're looking at those programs. But that really did kind of drive our thinking to step back and look at those programs. So we can, we'll definitely look at, and we can actually, you know, start talking about those programs first with those parameters of finances and the driver, the urgency driver, is the priority repairs and replacements. I mean, you know, there's no question that that's been a driver for us, but does it need to, there's some limited, and then there's some long-term, like you said, that go into renovations and those types of things. And those might be things that we definitely don't want to undertake without looking at programs. Yeah, it does kind of marry together. So I think going back, we can look at some, insert in here some different timeframes to come back and kind of this is where we are with this, and we can continue to talk through it this fall.
I was just going to ask any other feedback from the board.
I'll try to keep it brief because I've spent quite a bit of time thinking about these kinds of things in general. And the first thing I want to say is with regard to just this committee and setting it up and everything, I don't have an issue with that. But I'm very concerned about what sort of charge we give that committee and how we kick them off and what direction we push them in. My experience with project work is it's a little bit like planning a flight for an airplane. Where you go in the beginning of the flight determines your indirection much more than any correction you make near the end of the flight. And with that in mind, I think we really want to make sure that this committee is pushed in the correct direction. And where they wander along the way, that's the purpose of the committee. They will find us the best route. But if they're not going in the right direction to start with, we're heading for disappointment. I think that just kind of really echoes Trustee Bowman's comments, but I just wanted to really emphasize where we start at and how we present this to the committee will greatly affect the outcome. As an example, we could just give them these charts today and say, go chart us a course for the future. And that's the same thing as saying, here we are in Houston, here's your airplane, take us someplace fun. And you might go to Miami, you might go to Minnesota, you might go to LA, who knows. But odds are we're not going to be satisfied that. If we say, we need to go see a few things and here's where we need to end up, that really changes the emphasis on how they chart that course and where they eventually go. So that's the first thing I wanted to say. The second thing I wanted to say, and this comes to the dichotomy between short-range and long-range planning. And I'll sort of recapitulate my history on this board. And when I first got into it, I thought I knew something about school finance, and I've been learning more as I've gone. And I've learned that it's impossible to run a school district, an ISD in Texas, without carrying long-term debt. Now, with that in mind, if you look at our financials, look at our state rating as far as our financials goes, the only blemish on our record is that we're carrying a lot of long-term debt. And I think several trustees have spoken to me, and I'm certainly there. We would like to reduce that debt. At the same time, we're being squeezed by facilities that have not been they're just simply nearing their end of life. I mean, these things don't last forever, and I've used the analogy of a conversation I had with one of my constituents who said, Jeff, I've been living in this same house. This house was built, in before 1960, and it's still here. Why do we need to be replacing stuff at the schools? And my rejoinder was, yeah, okay. How many times have you replaced your central air over those 60 plus years? That's what we're looking at with the mechanical systems and the roofing systems and things like that in these schools. You put new roofs on homes, you put new air conditioners in homes, and it costs money. And so we're getting squeezed by that at the same time, and that means reducing our debt is both necessary and difficult, and I think we need to really present that to any committee that does this. And the last thing I wanted to mention is, again, conversations I've had with other trustees, and I think, again, it kind of echoes something Trustee Bowen mentioned, is if you just look, and also the reason why the scope of this thing has expanded, if you just look at maintaining the facilities you have, you miss the programmatic stuff. You miss that in a few years, X is going to be mandated or Y is going to be mandated, and you've got to have facilities for it. You miss the fact that, yes, we can maintain these facilities, but a lot of these facilities are temporary buildings, and that's not the smartest way to spend money. So I've mentioned several times when talking to people about this, there's an old commercial for oil filters that says, you can pay me now and buy an oil filter, or you can pay me later when your engine fails because you didn't get an oil filter and an oil change and you need a new engine. And I think that's also something we need to really keep in mind. How, not necessarily how do we replace this stuff, or even why we should replace it, or even what schedule we should replace it on, but how do we chart a course that gets us from here to the future with the least amount of money on maintenance? Not spending too much and buying an oil filter every month, and not spending too little and having the engine blow up.
Thank you. Mr. Cottrell?
Yeah, forgive me, my voice has been a little bit messed up since game 5, but I'm all right. You know, to their comments and everything, you know, I think the goal is, with the best of intentions and everything, to put us a plan going forward. I think to Trustee Bowen's comments, from that January to March, it just says committee meetings. An agenda of sort that says, at this meeting on this date, our topic is finance. Ms. Benzai is coming in. At this next meeting, Mr. Miller's coming in with Alex and talking about these topics. You know, Dr. Staley with whatever programs and things like that. Maybe that will help fill in some of the question about what's really going to be discussed. And then, you know, I can tell you from serving on committees, each one of these could be their own committee. Programs, finance, you know, facilities, you know, each one of them is its own committee. So it is going to be hard to do, I think, you know, to really tackle those. But maybe it does help, though, if there is that agenda that we can look at and say, okay, at this meeting, you know, this is what they're going to be talking about. And then my other question was, from that January to March timeframe, is the plan like every 2 weeks, every 3 weeks? Just to kind of get an idea, and maybe, again, an agenda kind of helps us understand. I mean, you know, Ms. Benzai, is she going to have one night to try to tackle finance with the discussion? Because that's going to be hard to do.
Yeah, and the plan was every 2 weeks. You know, it was twice a month. It was kind of the initial plan. But yes, a detailed, and what we can do is kind of try to, we'll have something for the board meeting. Okay, so we'll go ahead and create something a little bit more detailed for the board meeting and put that out so that we can maybe, if we need to talk about that some more and look at that. But we absolutely can do that, along with periodic reviews. You know, this is where we are, periodic updates, if you will. We can certainly do that and build those in. You know,
Because I think you know, the concerns that we may have is, we're here, we live and breathe this every day, and we know how overwhelming it can be to understand finance, and to give a committee so many charges, so many guidelines, so many goals. It's an awful lot for them to try to do, to give that long-range plan. So, you know, we want to support it. You know, I think we all know what the intentions are, and I think it's great. But making sure they have all the tools necessary to succeed is what's most important.
Yeah, we'll go back and in all honesty too, Cabinet has already sat down twice with brainstorming sessions and going back and starting to prioritize some things, and just, so we will, all that pre-work, you know, it has to be done. I mean, we have to really go through and see where, you know, what are some big things that we're seeing, and start getting some of those brainstorming ideas. So it's definitely not going to be what I call a blank slate so much, is just, you know, but really given that data and that information. This is our facilities utilization. This is our, this is our demographic data. But go back and really make sure that we have that information clear, as well as some programs. And we continue to talk through that, and, you know, really try to continue to narrow that scope. So we'll have something more detailed next week.
Okay.
We can do that.
Ms. Davis, did you have anything to add?
I think I'll hold off for a little while. Thanks.
Okay.
Okay.
Mr. Sanchez?
Dr. Engel, thanks for bringing this forward. I do think it's important, maybe just for context, for us to think about the other committees that this would be in line with that we typically have at the district level, where we engage community members, where we engage staff that have the expertise in these areas, that provide campus insight as well as administration insight. So maybe for a future Friday packet, we could just see the number of members that are making up our other committees. I think much of this is available online, but just for the purpose of seeing how this fits in context. I do struggle maybe with some of the things that have been shared, in that if we're going to ask a committee to think about this boldly and creatively, if we're going to ask them to make recommendations, that we're not trying to influence from the start. I think that's a different kind of committee, and so we may reshape what this charge is. I think that based on what was brought forward, the idea is probably based on feedback we've gotten from past committees, that sometimes it feels like we're already coming forward with a recommendation and we're looking to bring a committee along to validate that. And what I appreciate with what was brought forward today is, at the end of the day, there are lots of variables at stake that we are trying to navigate. And if at the core enrollment is a big piece of our funding, and if funding and balanced budgets is a big piece of a board priority, then I think that's ultimately going to influence and drive lots of the conversation that occurs. And so maybe there's a balance between how much we engage at the beginning from a board perspective to influence what we think should be focused on. If we ultimately want there to be some bold ideas and creative ideas that get brought forward that are not bound by something that is more prescribed. I guess I also think about this as an ongoing committee. And so maybe there's not really an end date, but there are seasons that the committee is focusing on different areas of the district that are informing a long-range plan. And it's a commitment that we ask people to make for whatever period of time that is, and then ultimately look to continue to bring in different perspectives, so that we don't get so mired in our own thinking and beliefs about what is or isn't possible. I think there's no perfect answer for a committee, and I think we'll find differing opinions no matter how we go about doing this. But at the end of the day, I think respecting the experience and expertise of staff and cabinet, and of our community members who have a front row seat to what they see as being really important, is not something that we should underestimate. And at the end of the day, we bear the responsibility from a budget standpoint to make the best decisions we can. And so I appreciate all the discussion, because I think that's what we would hear in the community. That's really a responsibility that we have. I would just offer a voice that says, I think this is really important. I think it's the right thing to do. I don't necessarily think we should be so prescriptive at the start and approach this as something that truly is long-term, and I don't know that we're going to have a solution right at the beginning. Thank you, Mr. President.
Mr. President, I don't disagree at all with the committee coming together to give us some recommendations. You know, going through that big binder that we got it's very intimidating. There's a lot of information in there. My concern is, if you're looking for 3 to 5 years out, and what's the source of funding? Are they going to look at what our taxpayer income is? Or are they going to be planning for the next bond sale? I think we most definitely need to focus on some of those immediate needs that I saw in the binder. The chillers, the roof, things like that should definitely be focused on. I guess I would say, if they were looking at a more narrow time frame, maybe within the next 2 years, because of what we've seen with the cost of materials, how it skyrocketed. I'm leery about going any further than 3 to 5 years. Another thing, in the binder, there's a couple of very large things in there, the multi-purpose arena, also a performing arts center. And maybe I just haven't received enough information about what those facilities would be used for. I don't know that I want the community looking at that without us first determining those are pretty major issues. There's no way we can fund them without like a bond or something like that. And I would hate for the parents and everybody gets so excited about it and us say, no, there's no way we can do that. But I definitely like getting the community involved to see what the status of our facilities are, what the immediate needs are, and get their input on that. Another concern I have is are our enrollment numbers going to go up? I guess when the west side starts getting built, we'll see a need to build some new facilities over there. But for right now, like within the next couple of years, I don't know what the enrollment numbers are going to do. But just looking at the school, how the current facilities are used, and if something can be moved to another place to be better incorporated, I have no problem with that. But I'm concerned about the long-range view of it and some of the things that are in there that could be very, very pricey.
Yes, and I think thinking of the budget parameters have got to be the draw. I mean, you know, we're looking at that. That's why that's so important with this. And in the demographic information and those projections, and that will come from Templeton. We will get information and bring that back, and that will absolutely be important for decision making too, is demographic data. And no, I think we're definitely not. So there are some, I think some of the projection, Mr. Miller's here, but I think some of that was what we call it. If it's possible, could we have?
We had a name for it. It was, forget the name I used, aspirational.
Aspirational, thank you. I was trying to remember what he said.
They've been in the master plan for a long time, and our stadium was designed with those things in mind, but it has never really rose to the level to compete with some of the critical things that we've had to do over the last 10 years. And so we generally just keep those on there because they've been important enough to include in the past.
Yes. So thank you for bringing that up, because those are definitely, there's necessities really, if you will, like you were talking, the roof, the airs, and then there's aspirational, you know, projects that, and certainly facilities that we're not, that's just all a part of it.
I'd like to speak to that, and I think Trustee Sanchez brings up a good point here. And really to tie these last two comments together, you know, if you've got a car, getting a custom paint job is aspirational. Fixing your radiator is immediate. And I think that's the situation we're in. I think if we would have had, you know, I know we have not discussed facilities needs in long-term planning very much at all since I've been on the board. I get the feeling that, well, I got the feeling that when I received that packet in August that, well, okay, here's the stuff that's going to be in your bond package, and you're going to pass a bond package pretty soon. And I was pleasantly surprised to find out that we don't have to have one on the ballot this time out, you know, in 2023, but it seems pretty obvious to me that we're going to have to do something about it in 2024. And so I couldn't help but think that if we had had a long-term planning process in place, maybe that would be a little less opaque, and maybe as a district we could chart a course a little better and you know, get out of the situation where we're constantly fixing the radiator and fixing the brakes and fixing the muffler, so that we can get out from under that pile of debt and start buying some of those aspirational things. But you know, that's the course we need to chart.
Yeah, and maybe just to add to that a little bit, I think that issue kind of speaks to another pitfall that these committees can sometimes have, which is that we as a board, whether intentionally or unintentionally, offload the responsibility of making big decisions onto committees. So that we can just ratify their recommendation instead of having to stand behind it. And I think that this happened some with the COVID issues. It definitely happened with school start times, and I'm sure it happens with facilities also, where we don't take a vote saying we want to ask for a bond election to build a new arena. We say, oh, a committee recommended it, and we're just ratifying their recommendation. And so the committee discussion isn't about digging into issues that we don't have the capacity to dig into. It becomes a side debate about the hot button issue of the committee. And so I would hate to see that happen with this committee also. I think there are some big decisions that we just have to make as a board and get out of the way. And if it looks like the committee's spending too much time debating one way or the other on something, then that could end up eating up a lot of their time and energy, and for something that is going to be voted on by us anyway. And so I would hate to see that happen. I mean, when we originally embarked on the needs assessment process a couple of years ago, I felt that was kind of putting the cart before the horse because we hadn't done a lot of this work. We don't have an academic master plan. We don't have a long-range plan for our programs. And so we contracted with architecture firms to develop a needs assessment without having a view of what we thought the future of our programs actually was. And so the aspirational projects that we are given are things like arenas and large facilities. But maybe if we had a more comprehensive view of what our aspirations really are, then maybe they aren't giant facilities that get built by architects, but maybe they're things like small facilities, small projects at the campuses, or other things that would add a lot more to the academic experience. And so, I guess all of that is to say that, and we have to kind of do things in order. We have to figure out our academic master plan first, and then we figure out what kinds of programs would support it, and then we figure out what our facilities needs are, and then we prioritize our facilities needs. And right now we've got some of that last piece, but not a lot of the first piece. And so it kind of feels to me like we're going out of order a little bit. And it would almost be nice to, and this is probably way too big of a discussion for today, but it would almost be nice to have some sort of bond election in the future just to cover those high priority replacement items and almost nothing else. Like just the immediate needs we know of, to take some pressure off of that side so that over the next few years we can take a much longer term look at what our long-term needs are, and then on another cycle we could have kind of have a separate vote to have those needs taken care of after we've gone through a comprehensive evaluation process. And so I'm hoping that the committee realizes that something like that is what we would need. And I think the worst possible outcome for a committee like this is to come out with a huge list of projects and not a lot of time spent looking into the academic needs that those are really going to support. So.
And I really do appreciate this discussion, because that is kind of where we did take that step back, and really the long-range facility replacement is somewhat of a bond every 5 years, I mean, there's some of that. But as you look at that, there's a need to step back and look at those programs. And we do have a strategic plan, but using that strategic plan and to kind of see what, maybe where are we with that too? We've talked about that, kind of giving us update. But we will give some more specifics.
Okay.
Definitely. We can, give a little more detail on some of these dates and things, and then we
Okay.
can move from there.
I know that this is going to be presented at our board meeting, so what I'm hoping is in the Friday packet, we'll have some of the feedback that,
Yes.
was shared, that we'll have some more specifics and some more things, hopefully, that, can clear that. So, does that
Okay.
sound good?
Fine. Thank you. Okay, and as
And
our.
thank you for that discussion, because I think there's been some things in terms of long-term facilities and things of that nature that we know that, we need to address. And, being able to, I guess, articulate what this committee needs to look at versus what our immediate needs versus, programs and things of that nature, so. All right, and now we'll move on to our second presentation on student academic growth.
Okay, and we have got some amazing people here, and we're excited to share with the board the hard work district and campus staff are engaged in to meet the superintendent target of first-time instruction, student academic growth. And Dr. Bayard and Dr. Silva will provide you with an overview of the work, followed by a deep dive into the student-focused work on two campuses, Landelt Elementary and Brookside Intermediate. So we are really, really pleased to have Ms. Reno and Ms. Britton here from Landelt, and also Dr. Glarden and Ms. Searcy from Brookside Intermediate. So with that, I'm going to turn this over to Dr. Bayard, and we are excited about this opportunity to share with you this afternoon.
Thank you, Dr. Engel. As we approach this next board meeting with the consideration for the district and campus improvement plans, a significant component of that is the student academic growth. That is our focus for this school year. Of course, it is tightly aligned with our mission statement, igniting learning for all, and ensuring that each student achieves. As we ensure each student achieves, that opportunity and that ensuring growth is so important for us, and that is our huge focus for this year. Is a continuation from last year with the work that was started last year, but with greater fidelity this year. Of course, we are aligning with our guiding principles to support our people, our purpose, and our promise. Again, our staff and our students are our greatest assets, and it's important that throughout the professional learning that we engage in this year, and that teachers are committed to within their professional learning communities, that we have the best resources and supports and expectations for student growth throughout the year. So the development of the campus improvement plans really started back in March with the initial approval of the superintendent targets. And that really helped our campus leaders and district leaders begin to think about the work and how to align the work from that time all the way through this beginning of school year. And that's a big change from years past of not having to get the targets and develop the campus improvement plans from scratch in September, October, after the summer has already passed. So that's a big change. It is those campus improvement plans or performance objectives are tightly aligned to the district improvement plans, as well as our strategic plan and community-based accountability. With the final approval of the revised targets in August, that gave campus leaders also an opportunity to use the data that has come in over the summer to refine their plans and to support professional learning on campus, support teachers through their guiding coalitions and professional learning communities, and really dive into how to support student growth. And so as we finalized our target areas, superintendent target areas, these became the primary target areas for the district improvement plan and also for the campus improvement plans for those performance objectives. And so each campus developed a goal for each of these target areas in addition to our district goals, so that the campus goals were tightly nested within the district's targets. Our focus for this afternoon, of course, is on first-time instruction, student academic growth. That is probably the biggest area when it comes to teaching and learning, personalized learning, all that growth and literacy development, et cetera, happens within that first-time instruction.
So to think about our superintendent target today and just our focus on engaging first-time instruction, we know that that starts first with our adults learning and our adults learning together to create and maintain highly effective PLCs. And so we see that on the top of our superintendent target. And then we know with that working together, we will see the students impacted, and we'll see that growth. So we started this work really intensely last year, and we expect to see student growth this year. You may remember we didn't have an impact statement last year with the PLCs, but the teachers have done amazing work. More about that from the campus leaders that we have here today. But thinking about our work, you've learned a lot about PLCs over the last year, and we have as well. And our focus of the work really has been around development and refinement and growth of PLCs and CCISD. We started this last year, and we continue this. The goal is to really ensure that every student benefits from the collective expertise of every teacher. So really building that collective capacity in our teacher teams to accomplish the goal. So as a district, we are committed to continuing to support the professional learning communities. We have targeted professional learning for our leaders that we call Leaders Learn. We've also had Lunch and Learns and our AP Academy. We have professional learning for teacher groups, our summer PLC events, our PLC 101, which is a course that we offer, and we really want sort of small groups of teachers to come together to learn about creating and maintaining PLCs. You can see on the slide here, we have a wealth of digital resources that we share for easy access, and we work as a district to kind of cull through all of the resources and create some playlists that are purposeful and helpful. Each campus, on the bottom left there, you see a little card, and each campus received a library of sorts with several books about PLCs. And interestingly, I was visiting a campus. They received that at the beginning of this year to support the work. Each of the books sort of has a different angle. I was at Seabrook last week with Ms. Hicks, and she mentioned that her instructional coaches grabbed one of those books and has really dived into it and have changed some of their practices based on their new learning. So this is a journey. I guess that's what I really want to say is this is a journey, and we will continue steps toward it and maintain focus on it, which is a lovely thing. Also, there are many ways we support, but sometimes it looks like learning walks, sometimes it looks like coaching conversations or database conversations. Obviously, we have goal-setting conversations as well, and different professional learning. So really, the true work happens at the campus level. So I would, again, like to introduce Deb Reno, who's our principal at Landalt, and Amber Britton, who is our 5th grade teacher at Landalt, as well as the Guiding Coalition leader at Landalt, and they're here to share a little bit about the Landalt story.
All right, thank you, Dr. Silva. Landalt is a campus of varied learners, and to meet them where they are, we've had to have a shift in our thinking. And so when Dr. Silva was talking about student growth, we've never been a campus that's just looked at the STAR data. That's the only kind of data we've ever looked at. But we have made a shift in our thinking when we're looking at that STAR data, not just to see if those students have, if they've approached or met or masters, but really looking instead at that individual learner to ensure that all the students are showing growth. And so to achieve this, we've done different things. And so we have used individual data through a variety of ways. We have data walls. We group students by skill for intervention to have students be accountable for their own learning and helps them to set goals. The data walls that you see in the picture are just some examples which allows the staff to be able to view their students' data in a different way, and then we move those students' cards as they progress. On the next picture, it shows some examples of the goal sheets that we have for our students. On the next slide, there we go. And so we are a Leader in Me campus as well as a Wave 2 school working with Ed Elements and personalized learning. And so our students, they set goals and have leadership binders, which allow them to be in charge of their own learning. And this has also contributed to student growth. And last year, another thing that we did is we implemented a 30-minute chunk of time specific to each grade level. And during that time, this allowed for teachers to be able to share students and fill in gaps. This was an instrumental part of having students in grades K through 5 grow and master essential skills that they hadn't previously learned. This time was not specific to those who didn't pass the STAR test, but it allowed for an individual plan for what skills that each student needed. We are continuing intervention this year, but one shift is that we're going to use our PLC time, that professional learning community time, to monitor student progress in our essential standards through the use of common assessments. And so on the next slide, you will see kind of one of our intervention groups in action on the left side. And then in the right side, it's an example of one of our PLCs. And so I'm going to introduce Amber Breton, who is one of our fabulous Landalt teachers, and she does help to facilitate our guiding coalition. So Amber, turn it over to you.
So this year we did make that shift with our guiding coalition to better support the diverse learners that we have at Landalt. One representative from each grade level makes up our guiding coalition, and then I facilitate the meetings, helping them lead their team PLCs. Allowing teachers to be the leaders of our PLC time ensures that we have a better understanding of the 4 questions that guide PLC and guide our work, which allows us to have a deeper understanding of our essential standards as well. We believe that when teachers grow in their learning, that we're going to see the impact and students are going to grow in their learning as well. Time has always been a struggle for teachers. There's only so much time in a school day, and so we have really appreciated the instructional planning days that we have this year. It's given us much needed PLC time so that we can come together and continue to develop those common assessments to check for understanding in the essential standards, and then look at student data and make plans for intervention moving forward.
All right. Thank you for sharing that story. Similar to Landalt, all our elementary campuses are really on this journey as well. We continue to evolve and grow. Last year we had pockets of excellence, and we still do this year, but we are intentional about supporting the work to create fidelity across the district. And so these are just a couple of the ways that our elementary schools are focused on growth. Many were mentioned by Deb and Amber, but we continue to do that work. You'll see some of the intentionality on this slide and the next slide. Got lots of supports. And so now I would like to introduce Dr. Laura Glarden, our principal at Brookside, and Laura Searcy, who is an 8th grade science teacher, and they're here to share a little bit about the Brookside journey.
Thank you, Dr. Silva.
Yeah.
At Brookside, it's exciting to celebrate our growth and our progress, big or small. We celebrate our students and we celebrate each other as educators. I would like to share with you our celebrations and growth as a campus at Brookside. Brookside is an established PLC campus with a strong culture of collaboration. When I became the principal just last year, PLCs were already using best practices and data to inform teaching and learning. Our teachers had identified their content-specific essential learning standards, and the campus had embedded time during the day to provide Tier 2 interventions for students. The teachers were making progress in the quest for growth for all. My first goal as principal was to work with my leadership team to establish a campus guiding coalition. As a campus PLC, we spent the first part of the year learning together about the goals and mission of a guiding coalition, the why, to build a collective responsibility, guide our decisions, advocate for the PLC process, and support the change process on campus, always focused what is best for our students. And by March, the Brookside Guiding Coalition was formed. The Guiding Coalition continues to do amazing work living and leading our campus mission, our vision, and collective commitments and goals. You can see the work we did as a campus in slide 1. We did aligning our belief statements. Our instructional coaches have been instrumental in leading and supporting our entire departments and PLCs through grade level and content alignment and clarity of essential learning standards. Digging deeper and diving into the content, teachers and coaches have been very intentional to create instructional consistency across the grade levels. And every teacher team in every department has created SMART goals for their teams. Our goals are up in our PLC room and serve as a visual reminder of how we will support each other in reaching our goals as teams and as a campus. And you can see there in slide 2, our goal wall that's up for everyone for all of our contents and some of the work that the Guiding Coalition did there with our campus current practices and our next steps. And I've asked Ms. Cersei, our science department lead, to share with you the work that our PLCs and teacher teams are doing on campus.
At Brookside, teams have common planning to collaborate, plan for instruction, reflect, and discuss student performance. In our PLC weekly meetings, we have structured conversations about our students and how they are progressing throughout the curriculum. We use student information to guide our next steps and determine what students need with regard to specific learning standards or our TEKS. Each week, we identify specific students to work with in our B time on specific TEKS, which is similar to what other campuses may call advisory, student support, Spartan time, or win time. Our B time is used in many ways. It can be a pre-teach time. It can be for interventions. It can be for enrichment. It can be for content tutorials. It can be for BPA practice, whatever we need it to be. For the weekly B time student selection process, we are using real-time current student performance data from content, common assessments, and identifying students who have or have not shown mastery on a specific essential learning standard. We use that information to essentially electronically draft or hand select students by content based on individual performance. Drafting is a weekly cycle, and how the time is used is constantly changing based on what students need right now. Teachers may select students to reteach or provide intervention to those who have not yet shown mastery of an essential, or some students may be selected because they have mastered an essential and are ready to be challenged and provided with enrichment learning. Some students are selected because they have gaps in learning and need a foundational skill reinforced or taught to them before an upcoming essential standard is introduced. Teacher teams are very strategic in planning and selecting students for this time. Students also have an opportunity to choose to register for a teacher's B-time class if they need tutorials, support, or reteaching, if they have not yet already been selected by a teacher. Every Monday, students are checking their Skyward grades in every class, setting goals, and finalizing their B-time schedule for the week. This is a weekly process. So every Monday, students know their B-time schedule for the week, and if they were selected by a teacher for that current week, or if they have open days and opportunity to self-select. Each week, our B-time scheduling and selection process starts all over.
So our Guiding Coalition and our PLC processes are constantly a work in progress. We'll continue to adjust, revise, and refine what we do, always based on the needs of our students. We're not perfect, and we have a lot of room to grow, but as a campus, we're committed to the PLC process, improving our systems and using data to inform every next decision and step in our journey. Just as we celebrate individual growth for all students, we celebrate individual growth in our PLCs. We are a work in progress, but we'll continue to grow, just like our students do. And at Brookside, growth for all means all. We are all learning, we are all growing, we are all making progress together, and we are all celebrating our growth together, students and our staff. So thank you for celebrating our PLC journey with us.
Thanks.
Thank you to Dr. Glardian.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And so just in addition, I feel like I should just end it right there because that was beautiful, but I'll say ditto about the district as a whole. We are all on the journey. Campuses are in different places, but you can see just like Brookside, their story is specific to them, but all the secondary campuses are working toward utilizing data, identifying essential standards, creating opportunities for students to grow. So there's some examples of that on this slide right here throughout the secondary campuses, and that
concludes
So
our
as we think about student growth, it sounds broad, but it really does come down to the individual student, whether the student is already academically quote-unquote ahead, or if the student might be behind, or wherever they are. It's about taking wherever the student is and helping them through supports to improve throughout the year. As you heard from the leaders at both campuses, that is the work of the PLCs, and as teachers grow and the PLCs grow, they're able to support individual students. That is how we get more academic growth. So key differences from last year are that use of data through the PLCs consistently and with fidelity across campuses. It's not that we haven't used data, but it's using data to support the growth of each individual student, and not just those that might have not passed. Right? It's not about passing. It's about how much more can we help every student. So those students who are already at meets academic performance, how do we get them beyond that? And you see some of the others, as Dr. Silva mentioned. The drafting is done, a drafting of students based on their individual needs and the supports that each teacher can provide those students. That is a big component that we see at many secondary schools as well as at elementary schools. It's just done a little bit differently. We'd like to open it up to any questions, and I want to thank the four of you for co-presenting. We appreciate you.
And I'll open it up to the board for questions.
I guess
Ms.
I'll
Davis.
start. We've kind of seen how this intervention works in the elementary schools. You know, the teacher's got a group of kids working over here, kids working independently over there, and she's got the ones right here that she needs to give extra support to. What does that look like on an intermediate campus? You say it like an advisory period. I'm just trying to picture where all these kids are going, you know, on that particular day. Can you tell me, do they go to like their normal advisory class, but then some go to this teacher's class? What does that look like?
On Monday, they go to their normal advisory scheduled B time. But on Tuesday, everybody's going to a different class or a different teacher. On Wednesday, every student's going to a different place. So every day of the week, they're going somewhere completely different based on whether or not the teacher needs to see them or whether or not they've selected to go and see somebody. So every single day of the week, they may go to a different teacher, getting help in a different class or a different standard, depending on if they're selected or if they got to self-select and choose.
Okay, and so during this time frame, that those teachers, that this student's going to go see Ms. Cersei.
Yes.
Does you have other kids in your classroom that you are also?
Yes, so we plan ahead at PLC time. So we're going to look at our PLC schedule and what that's going to look like for B time. So we may have one teacher who's focusing on a specific TEK, another teacher that's focusing on intervention, another one on an extension piece. So really utilizing our strengths as a team. And so it's not my students, it's our students. So if a student needs assistance in science, what does that look like based upon what we're studying, what needs to be retaught, and who is ready to move ahead? So who's ready for that next level of extension? And what does that look like for them?
Okay,
So
yeah.
they're still getting an opportunity.
Yeah, I definitely see the team, the team effort and work in that. Thanks for mapping that out.
Okay.
And first of all, Ms. Britton, Ms. Reno, Dr. Glardon, and Ms. Cersei, thank you for that presentation. Just to kind of piggyback off that, because that was one of the questions I had, what does an intervention look like? And I was going to use 5th grade math, for example, and then I was going to use 8th grade science as another example. As we look at, approaches, meets, and masters, we see, in kind of that comparison between 2019 and 2021, and we kind of understand and know why some of those scores are down, but what does an intervention look like, or what are some of the things that you all are using, to help those students learn? Because I agree with Dr. Bayard, and a wise man told me when I went off to college, and that was my dad, who's a college professor, you never want to tell a college professor that I'm trying to get an A in your class. I'm trying to learn, and I'm trying to master the content, and the grade will come. So with that in mind, What does that look like?
Yeah, so.
Just a normal day, what does an intervention look like for?
Okay. So we have a 30-minute chunk of time, and we have many teachers working during this time, during that intervention period. So the 5th grade teachers are pulling groups, and we also have interventionists that are also pulling groups. I like that you mentioned a student draft. So we drafted students kind of based on their needs. And we look at the individual student and said, okay, well, this student is really struggling with adding and subtracting fractions. So this group of students is going to go with Miss Norton, because she's great at teaching those struggling kids how to add and subtract fractions. And then she's got her own, we work together as a team and kind of come up with that game plan of the resources that they're going to be using. And there might be a couple teachers doing that. And then there's a couple teachers who are helping students just who need a little bit more help with dividing decimals. And so they've got a group going, and the students that need that skill are kind of going with those teachers. So we work together to formulate a plan of what that's going to look like, and then we've got many teachers working at the same time to help get that done.
Fantastic. Ms. Cersei?
Hi, yes, so for within the classroom, it'll look different between B time and also within the classroom. So in the classroom, it may be that we have an interventionist or a support teacher pulling a small group or a leveled assignment where the students are looking at more like foundational skills or vocabulary based, just to make sure that we understand what it is we're seeking to learn. We do have learning targets in place that they reference. So they know their goal of the learning going into the unit that they pre-assess, which really does help us figure out who needs the assistance. In B time, let's say we're looking at chemistry and the structure of an atom. So if we're looking at our students that are not where we need to be, so we may be looking at what is an atom, what's inside and what is outside, right? What is a proton, what's a neutron, what's an electron? But if we're at a student that has already mastered that content and the structure of an atom, we may be looking closer to bonding. And so what is the valence electrons interaction with something else? And so how do those bonds form? So really looking at more of a direct teach versus a facilitation or an extension.
Fantastic. I love to hear that collaboration, because I know from my own students, for example, once they get to high school, and I'll just use this as a prime example, I know physics for my son, he had his regular teacher, but as he explained to me, well, the other teacher explains it a little bit better. And then I said, well, don't you feel like you're stepping on their toes? Don't you feel like you're, and he was like, no, they don't mind at all. And so, you know, it's refreshing to hear that that's starting, that's happening at the intermediate and at the elementary level. The other question I had, and I saw it on slide, I think it was slide 7 or 8. It's like on page 45. But, and it showed 89%, I think, of teachers are in PLC, you know, group back in last year. What does that look like this year? Like, is that number still the same, and is that because you have some special ed, some, you know?
And that was 89% of core teachers, and there were some singletons in there.
Okay.
And so it's actually close to, if not, it should be almost 100% because of the IP days that have been established this year,
Okay.
which singletons are paired up with other singletons throughout the district, and so they're able to meet on our IP days. And so every teacher is part of at least one professional learning community this
Okay.
year.
Fantastic.
In the core areas, and really in all areas this year.
Great. Mr. Cottrell?
Yeah. So first, thank you all very much for being here. Great presentation. You know, I'm watching their faces while y'all are talking, and, you know, y'all make all of us so proud. So thank you. You absolutely do. You know, when Ms. Rena, when you said shifting thinking, you know, when you collaborate the way that y'all do, having an open mind and be willing to do that is very important, and we appreciate it. And the fact that you said it's not your student, it's our student, you know, that's the collaboration that, you know, we love to hear about. You know, maybe Brookside needs to go from being the Bulldogs to the Killer Bees. I'm hearing all that. Thinking about the Astros.
We call ourselves the B team.
Well, y'all are A team for us.
Thank you.
Yeah, you absolutely are. But we're very proud, and I appreciate y'all for coming.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Mr. Bowman?
Yeah, I guess this is more of a question for Dr. Baird, Dr. Silva, but have some of these best practices made it out to the other schools also? I mean, are the elementary and intermediate schools kind of learning how some of these are done and adopting them?
Absolutely, and we have lots of opportunities for collaboration. During our Leaders Learn time, we have built-in collaboration time, so Deb has an opportunity to share with another principal, and we have multiple opportunities for that in our Leaders Learn as well as in our principals meeting. We also have where we are visiting each other. I mean, we have people visiting and checking things out and thinking about how it can apply to their campus, because they're all a little different and we all have different programs and things, but absolutely, that's the goal. You know, we talk about, or I talked about teacher collective efficacy, but really, you know, district-wide collective efficacy, so we can sort of get the biggest bang for our buck is the goal. So we have those opportunities built in, and we'll continue to find different ways to be able to do that as well.
You know, so many cohesive levels of support, and so we have curriculum coordinators that lead learning walks with campus leaders and with other campus folks, but the instructional coaches also play a significant role across the district to ensure that fidelity of implementation. And so I'd love if one of you can share about the role of instructional coach, of how they support you in improving academic growth.
Absolutely. So our instructional coaches have just been instrumental in a lot of the learning and things that are happening, on our campuses. But we have, they're involved in the learning as our teachers, but they've kind of taken a little bit of a step back, and that allows for the teachers to be able to grow and then be able to facilitate. And so in thinking about, Amber Breton, one of our teachers, is that, she's facilitating that, but our instructional coaches are there as well. So they're there to, to be a part of, to provide input, and then, just to be a member of the journey, but they're not necessarily leading everything. It allows the growing, that allows us to, Landolph does launch leaders, and so it allows us to continue to launch leaders as, as we continue in this process. So it's, I really enjoy getting to see that growth happen as well.
They're there to support our work, which is really nice to see, because in the past, they've always kind of been like front and center, leading us, kind of guiding us on where we need to go. And so I feel like this year especially, teachers are really stepping up and doing that leading and being more authentic in that work. And so our instructional coaches are just really there to support us and remove obstacles for us and make our life as easy as possible as they possibly can. And it's really nice to see.
They've really supported the teachers in their learning, and teachers taking role in ownership in their own learning. They're facilitating and saying, how can I help you learn? How can I help you grow? What do you need from me in order to, how can I support you in your own growth as a teacher, as a PLC? And how can we work together? What do you need from me in order to grow? And so in turn, how does that help your students? Well, when our teachers are growing, our students are growing. And so they're supporting the whole, the whole community.
Fantastic. Did you have another question?
Yeah, I think that's all for now. Thanks.
All right.
I just want to thank you all for coming out and giving us a little insight into this. I really appreciate it.
And truly living up to the mission of igniting learning for all.
Yes.
Y'all are really-
Yes.
Thank you.
Agreed.
Oh, I do have one question. So we talked just briefly about how these practices are permeating out to all the schools. Do we have any sort of tool or feel or sense of how well this is going on? I mean, qualitatively, you've just assessed it. Is there anything quantitative to say that campus so-and-so is really far along in this process and campus such and such is getting there but not quite there? Is there anything like that out there?
So
Leaders Learn, go ahead.
Okay, well, Leaders Learn for sure, but we also have, and you may remember last year we had the PLC program gauge, and we've already started work toward our PLC program gauge for this year. So we have an opportunity to survey administrators, but also teachers and instructional coaches, so that we're able to sort of pinpoint besides the data that we will show you in the program gauge at the end, it's kind of a cumulative piece of data. We're also able to pinpoint areas that we might need to support specifically. And we do that through that process, but also informally a lot. We have opportunity for administrators to kind of click here and sign up for a visit. And we have a lot of visits where we go out and just support the work and continue the conversation to think through what might be the next step, that type of thing. So we have a couple of coaches who do that and go out to campuses to support, so.
Okay. And I'm sorry, when were you planning on sharing that with us?
The program gauge, I don't remember the timeline, but it's in the spring. We shared it last spring, and so we're going to collect data again this year and share, but I don't remember the exact date of that. The spring, for sure.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thanks.
All right. Well, seeing no further questions, once again, I wanted to thank you all for coming out today. Also wanted to thank, teachers and staff for putting in the work today. I know it was hard to, Astros parade and everything. That's why I'm dressed like this. I didn't go to the parade, but I just supported today. But anyway, thank you, for and please be sure to tell, teachers and staff that they are greatly appreciated. And with that, I will adjourn us at 5:52.
Thank you.